15, Jamie Williamson moved to Adams County in Broomfield from Texas with her husband, who I'll call Johnny. They were both in their early 20s. They'd gotten married young and didn't have the blessing of their parents. And they got here, and Jamie got a job. In fact, she got 3 jobs. And Johnny stayed home and smoked marijuana and abused his wife. And he abused her regularly, physically and mentally. And one night she got home and she hadn't brought the dinner home hot. It had cooled in the car. And Johnny tied her up and took a butcher knife. He warmed it on the stove, and then he branded her with it all over her body throughout the night. When I first got the call that she was in the hospital, and I met with her, she was a wreck of a human being who very clearly could have died. And we charged her husband with first-degree assault, a very serious felony. And the criminal justice system began its work, and I worked hard. About 3 months later, I lost contact with Jamie, and she called me. And she said, "I don't want to have anything to do with this case anymore. I love my husband. Please drop the charges." Now, when I was a young prosecutor 13 years ago, I was naive about the problems of domestic violence in our community, and it was surprising to me how many victims of domestic violence in particular later recant or don't cooperate with prosecutors. But I didn't want to give up on Jamie because I knew deeply inside me that if we couldn't bring justice for her, her husband was going to kill her. Now, his defense attorney came to me and said, "Brian, you don't have the victim. You can't prove this case. Give me a deal. We'll take a menacing," which in criminal law parlance is a significantly reduced probation-eligible felony. And I said no. I'd rather go to trial and lose. And tenaciously for the next 18 months, we worked that case. And I found Jamie hiding in Texas. I sent an investigator out to Texas. She was hiding with her husband's family. And we got her under subpoena and we brought her back to Colorado. And her husband is now serving 32 years in prison. That's why I decided to run for district attorney. And that's why I am proud to be your candidate for district attorney in the 17th Judicial District. Fighting for victims of crime is my passion in life. And in Adams and Broomfield counties, we need to have a district attorney of integrity and leadership and wisdom to fight the right fights, to make our community safe, to protect our victims, to make our criminal justice system fairer and better, and to be a model for our community. And that's why I'm here. Now, my very first political speech was in February in this same room. I had just filed my paperwork at 6 a.m. that morning. And I came here knowing that I needed to reach out to Broomfield Dems, and then Kathy turned to me and handed me the mic. And I'd never given a speech before. And I said, "Now go easy on me, I've never done this before." And I'm proud to be back a few months later. And maybe have a tad more polish as a candidate and the ability now to articulate why I'm doing this. So I'm from Colorado. I was born in Germany. My father was stationed there in the Air Force. We came back here when I was 2. My parents had met in Colorado. My mom was from Colorado. My dear 102-year-old grandmother still lives in her home in Washington Park. I just talked to her on my way over. I said, "Grandma, I'm gonna go give a speech." "Well, good luck, honey," she said. So I grew up in Aurora. We moved to Littleton when I was in 8th grade. I went to high school in Littleton. I went to college in Ohio. After college, I had the enormous opportunity to work in the Clinton White House, which I did for 2.5 years in the West Wing as a legislative aide in the White House Legislative Affairs Office. I then went up to Capitol Hill, worked for a senior member of Congress as his legislative assistant, press secretary, and later chief of staff. And then I did a year-long fellowship in the German government. And then I came home, and I went to law school at CU because I wanted to make an impact in my own community. And right after finishing law school, I was recruited by 2 people. The first was Mark Udall. He was then congressman. It was before he was a U.S. senator. And he recruited me to go back to D.C. to run his D.C. office. And the other was Don Quick. And Don was the elected district attorney here in the 17th. And he said, "Brian, come work for me. Just give a shot at working in a district attorney's office. I think your skill set and your passion and your commitment to justice will be a good fit for us." And I never left. And that was almost 13 years ago. And my current boss, our current DA, is term limited, and so it's an open seat, and I've decided to throw my name in the hat. And let me just tell you a little bit why I'm running. I start with that story deliberately because I'm running for district attorney to protect our victims. And we have victims all over this community of every kind of crime. And one of the hard parts of working in a district attorney's office is you see the underbelly of society and see how awful human beings can be to one another. But you also see grace and joy, and sometimes I have the opportunity to bring some of that to victims. And we have victims, like I said, from every walk of life. And my job and my goal and my pledge, if I'm your next district attorney, is to fight for all victims, specifically domestic violence victims, sex assault victims, human trafficking victims, and yes, ladies and gentlemen, we have a huge human trafficking problem here in Broomfield and Adams County. It's hard to admit, but I see it and we have it. So fighting for victims is my #1 priority. But it's also my priority to make the criminal justice system fairer and better for those who are in it. My motto that I teach the attorneys that I supervise, I currently supervise 25 attorneys. I supervise our entire district court unit, which means all of our felony cases, from third-degree assault to homicide, is to do the right thing at all times, in every case, no matter what. Now, what does that mean? For me, doing the right thing in every case, no matter what, means looking at the case, looking at what happened, looking at the defendant, and decided what is just. And sometimes the right thing to do for a defendant is to keep him out of the criminal justice system altogether. And that's why I pledge to you, if I'm your next DA, to expand our diversion program. Our diversion program, we charge people, low-level felony offenders typically, with a crime after they've committed one. But then instead of sending them to court, we bring them to our diversion office and put them through a year, sometimes longer, of an intense program of reconciliation, where they have to take responsibility and accountability for what they've done, where they pay restitution to their victims, and where they get treatment, sometimes for mental health, sometimes for alcohol, sometimes for drugs. And I'm proud to tell you all that in our diversion program here in the 17th Judicial District, in the last 2 years, we had a 97% success rate. It's worth a round of applause. That means those people who are coming out of diversion are not going back into the criminal justice system at all. And when that's appropriate, when that's the right thing to do, that's what we should be doing. And we need to have a DA who sees that and wants to make it bigger and better. And that's what I pledge to do. Sometimes the right thing to do is probation. Sometimes the right thing to do is a halfway house. Sometimes the right thing to do for our most violent offenders is to take their liberty away when they pose such a risk and such a danger to our community. But making the criminal justice system better also means being able to meet our defendants where they are. And that means addressing the mental health crisis that we have in the criminal justice system, getting treatment instead of locking up where we can. That means having people go into DUI courts or veterans courts. And we have a terrific veterans court in the 17th Judicial District, which helps veterans who have come back into society after they have served our country honorably, but are having trouble integrating and sometimes make mistakes and commit crimes. We're putting them in veterans court, and I want to expand that. Same for our mental health courts, same for our drug courts. I've worked in the DA's office for almost 13 years. I'm proud of the work that I do. I'm proud of the office. I'm proud of what we stand for. Like I said, I supervise 25 attorneys, and they're rock stars. I'm telling you, they're rock stars in the courtroom. I want to get them out of the courtroom. I want to get them into the community. I want to see our attorneys in schools. I want to see them in senior citizen centers. How many of you have had a call in the last 2 weeks from somebody saying that your social security number has been compromised and that you're going to get prosecuted for it? So I got this call. It was just 2 weeks ago. And it's a 303 number. It was a real voice. And the person on the other side of the phone sounds very stern and says, your social security number has been compromised, and if you don't do da-da-da-da-da, you will be prosecuted. And I'm a prosecutor. And yet for the first 30 seconds, my heart is racing, right? Thinking, what did I do? So if I have my heart racing, and for even a split second, I'm thinking, boy, I better call that number and give them my credit card number, God forbid. How much more are our elderly and our mentally handicapped and those who don't have the resources or education to see through that being preyed upon? And so I want to get our DAs, our staff, out into the community to educate and to try to prevent crime where we can. Finally, one thing I love to talk about, and it doesn't lend itself to a brochure or talking points generally, but if I'm your next district attorney, I want to be a good leader for the office. The district attorney's office is the largest law office in North Denver. We have over 200 employees, including almost 80 attorneys, and the district attorney needs to be a person of integrity. Like I said, a person of wisdom, a person of leadership, who shares this vision of doing the right thing at all times, in every case, no matter what, and makes it the ethos of the entire office, from our attorneys to our support staff, to our paralegals, to our investigators. And that's what I pledge to do. I want to be a district attorney that puts Adams and Broomfield counties on the map in terms of being an office that is fair, that is progressive, that cares about criminal justice reform at the same time that we care about community safety. Those two do not need to be mutually exclusive, and we can do it with the right leadership. So I'm very honored to be speaking to you today. My family lives not far from here. I'm raising my family here. We work out in the Paul Dervis Center. Broomfield is an enormously important part of this community, and I'm honored to be standing in front of you today. Thank you for letting me speak, and I'd love to take your questions. Yes, sir.
Two quick questions.
Go for it.
What is your name?
I think Kathy introduced me, but I should get better at telling you who I am.
I think you ought to wear a sign around your neck. We gotta know who you
cards and I have fundraising envelopes which have my name in big print. I'll be happy to give you one of them. That was a joke. I thought that would get a little bit of laughter. My name is Brian Mason.
Brian?
Yes.
Brian, government runs on taxpayer money.
Yes, it does.
Do you need more in your office? Tell me about the money in the district attorney's office.
Yeah. I mean, there are lots of important problems that always need more resources. And as an advocate for the DA's office, I will tell you, we need more resources. The things that I talk about, drug courts, veterans courts, diversion programs, don't come free. And so in order for us to implement a progressive vision for the office and for this community, we absolutely need more resources. Now, we've been blessed by our county commissioners in Adams County and by the city council in Broomfield to have the support of our funding elected officials, and I'm confident that we'll continue to have that support. But yeah, there's more to be done, and of course it costs money. Can we still do a lot with the resources we have? Yes, we can, and I pledge to do that too.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, sir.
Homelessness, addiction, and mental illness are all seem to be intertwined. It seems to be more and more of a bigger mess, for example, in Denver. I don't know how they're going to handle it, but it doesn't seem to be as bad a problem out here, but I'm sure that Adams County has some problems related to that. What do you see happening, or what do you think can be done to try and improve?
Yeah. Let me just start by saying the mental health crisis is real, and it's hard for people in my job to figure out what to do. And I apologize that I've been telling some graphic stories, but I think you should hear some of them to know what happens in this community. I had a case a couple of years ago where a 50-year-old man sexually assaulted a 90-year-old woman. And he was mentally ill. He was very mentally ill. And the court, in fact, eventually found him incompetent to proceed, which was appropriate. But I was scared. I was scared to let him back out into the community because I didn't want him to hurt somebody else, even though I knew he probably didn't know what he was doing. I don't think he did. So what do we do about the mental health problem? What do we do about this combination of homelessness and drug addiction and mental health? Truthfully, I don't know. I don't have a silver bullet answer for you other than this. We have to take every case and look at it individually. We have to do the right thing in every case. And sometimes if it's a homeless person who has stolen some food out of a 7-Eleven, prosecuting that man isn't the right thing to do, despite the fact that he broke the law. When it's somebody who's committing a bigger crime and is a danger to society, locking them up isn't necessarily the right thing to do, but getting them help and getting them into a hospital is. And so this isn't a perfect answer, and I realize that it may not even satisfy your question. But what I can tell you is that I'm deeply committed to working on the issue and to trying to do the right thing for everybody who comes across my desk, particularly those with mental illnesses. Yes, sir.
Do you think a mental health court in Broomfield is possible? And do you think the facilities, the hospitals for mental health are adequate in Colorado?
I couldn't hear the last part of that question.
Do you think the facilities that they will be sent to are adequate in Colorado?
Yeah, they're not. I mean, they're just not. And that also, I think, is a funding issue, a resource issue, and we can talk about that. But let me go back to the first part of your program. And since we have some city councilors in the room and some mayoral candidates, let me just say, our little courthouse over here has been great for a long time, but it ain't keeping up with Broomfield's growth. It's just not. We have, just in the little DA's office, which is part of the courthouse, which is part of the building, we're jam-packed in there. And we've been adding staff as Broomfield has grown because crime has grown. There's more crime in Broomfield than there used to be. It's still a good percentage to the population. It's not skyrocketed. But when you have more people and you have more growth, you're going to have more people making mistakes and committing crimes. We can be doing more in Broomfield in terms of specialty corps, in terms of facilities. And part of that will require some leadership and some collaboration with our city council. And I hope that I will get the opportunity to work with them because I love all of them. Yes, ma'am.
So this week, our president has said that the gun violence issue is deeply related to mental illness in this country. I know a couple of statistics related to gun violence, and two of them relate to what you've talked about, that women in this country are 25 times more likely to be impacted by gun violence, and domestic abuse is 5 times more likely to involve a gun when that gun is present in the household. So what I would like to know from you is what you think can be done about the gun violence issue, what you would like to see happen, and maybe give us a little bit about what you have seen relating gun violence to mental illness.
Thank you. 2 quick stories before I answer the question. One, the gun topic is very personal to me. I've had 2 very dear friends shot and killed. One of them was a colleague at the district attorney's office. His name's Sean May, and his case has not been solved. Another was a very, very dear friend of mine back on the East Coast, whose case took 10 years to solve. And so gun violence has impacted me personally. I was in church on Sunday morning, and our pastor got up to give a sermon, and she broke down because our youth group had been in El Paso all week on a mission trip, and they had been in the mall 2 days before the shooting. My children, who I don't talk about very often publicly, particularly when there's a camera, because I have prosecuted people who might wish to do me harm. But I will just say that young children, I have personally experienced, have to go through shoot drills in schools. And we're not talking high schoolers and middle schoolers, but elementary kids, kindergartners, and preschools. And that's not the kind of society that I ever wanted anyone's children to have to grow up in. So what can we do about it? I'm trying to be careful in these environments to stay in my own lane to some extent. The district attorney does not pass laws. The district attorney doesn't set state policy. But we can impact them, and our voices typically matter, and our voices as elected district attorneys can influence the debate. So let me tell you where I stand. Number 1, I'm for red flag bills. And I'm for the red flag bill that our legislature courageously passed with almost no Republican support, despite what the Republicans are suddenly saying now. We passed it with just Democratic votes because if somebody is presenting signs of being dangerous and they are mentally ill and they could actually go out and hurt or kill someone or many people, then we should be taking their guns away, at least temporarily, until we can find out if they're safe to own one or to have one. So I support that. I support background checks. I have never, ever, ever understood the opposition to background checks from the right, because despite the fact that the Second Amendment is real and it has protections, and I believe in our Constitution, I do think sometimes that the Second Amendment is misinterpreted from what the founders meant for it to be. But that aside, giving or having background check requirements doesn't actually prevent law-abiding citizens from owning a gun. It prevents people who shouldn't have a gun from getting one and then hurting other people. So I support background checks. And finally, I don't personally understand why normal citizens, non-law enforcement, non-military, need assault rifles. I just don't. I had the rather strange, I suppose unique experience of being at a range in law enforcement and shooting one of those guns. And I just don't understand why We need those in our general society. They're not something that you use for hunting deer. So that's where I stand, and I certainly would be privileged to contribute that voice to the gun control debate were I to be elected today.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Please.
Regarding the red flag law, there have been a number of communities that have said that their Second Amendment sanctuary counties or cities. How does your role impact those kinds of statements?
Yeah.
And is that even enforceable? That's my other question.
Well, let me tell you how I feel about that. One of the primary roles of the district attorney is to enforce the law. Now again, we have discretion to do the right thing in every case, and the law is not, I should say, criminal law, when we look at it with real eyes, is not always black and white. And that was a surprise to me when I first became a prosecutor. I thought it was going to be black and white. But the truth is, sometimes you have the proof that someone committed a crime, but putting that person in jail, which the law may require in that case, isn't the right thing to do. But I digress. When we're talking about, I just totally lost my train of thought while I'm talking to you, sanctuary cities. I'm always deeply skeptical as somebody in law enforcement when a leader in law enforcement says they're not going to enforce the law. I'm just deeply skeptical of that. And as your district attorney, certainly here in the 17th Judicial District, we would enforce the red flag law. Can I do anything about sheriffs in other counties in Colorado who say they won't enforce it? No. Other than lend my voice to the debate that these laws have reasons, credible reasons to be on the books. And in our county and in our judicial district, we're going to use them to try to save people's lives. Thank you.
Sorry, really quick question. So, since hate crimes have been on the rise lately as well, and in shootings, it's been primarily, we've seen white cis men be the primary shooters. In the last year, we've seen a lot who have said that they have been influenced by white supremacist dialogues and communities. Is there any sort of diversion programs or something the DA could do to try and, because most of these kids are young, they're younger than me, and they're shooting up schools or Walmarts or places like that. Is there anything we could do, or the DA's office could do, to have a diversion program to help catch these kids through like Safe to Tell or other things, so we're catching them and either trying to get back on the right path so they're not being influenced by white nationalism and white supremacy before they get so involved, and therefore preventing more possible crimes, because we're seeing it from a specific demographic.
I think that there is. I don't want to overpromise as a candidate for office that the DA could fix that problem, because that's not possible. But I do want to see the district attorney's office be a better partner with our schools, and developing and supporting programs like Safe to Tell and other ones where we can identify those issues in young people sooner so that we can try to prevent them from getting worse. I'll just add to that, the statistics are so clear that if you don't graduate from high school, your chances of going into the criminal justice system exponentially skyrocket. So we all have to be a part of this, but as your DA candidate and hopefully your next district attorney, I want our district attorney's office to be a better collaborator with our education partners to try to get our kids to graduate from high school, because just getting them to graduate is more than halfway there in keeping them out of the criminal justice system together and then keeping our community safe. That's not being soft on crime. That's being forward-thinking and ultimately protecting our own community. I think my time is up. Before she steals the mic from me, let me just give a shout out to my dear friend Eileen, who is hosting a meet and greet for me tomorrow night. So I hope you haven't gotten too much of me or gotten so much of me tonight that you don't want to come back tomorrow, because we'd love to have you at her house. And I'll make one other plug for me and for all the candidates. Running for office is hard. It's hard. And there are lots of people always ask me, well, how can you help? And there are lots of ways that you can help, from the big to the small. If you will go to my website or go to my Facebook page and hit the little like on it, people look at that. They look and see, how many likes does this guy have? He either doesn't have any support in his community or he has a lot. So go do that. When I do posts, if you're following me, like those too. People look at that stuff, and it helps. And of course, it's really expensive to run for office, and I would love your financial help too if that's a way that you can contribute. So thank you so much for this opportunity, and let's take back our country.